If I had known my boss wasn't coming back, I never would have stepped through that warped turquoise door. But I did, and I've been haunted by that house ever since. It was early summer in 1993, the kind of Saturday that boiled your skin before noon and baked the desert into a shimmering mirage. I was 16, working under-the-table demolition gigs with a guy named Ron, who mostly operated out of a beat-up red van and a Motorola pager. That morning, he picked me up with a lit cigarette in his mouth and a grin that showed too many yellow teeth. "Easy job today, kid," he said, puffing smoke into the cracked windshield. "Old house out past Amboy, gutting it for scrap." I didn't ask questions. I never did. My parents thought I was working for a local construction crew, and I liked the cash, enough to keep gas in my beat-up dirt bike and chili dogs on the weekends. But I should have paid attention to the way Ron avoided eye contact when we passed the last sign of civilization, or how he muttered, "Place gives me the creeps," when we pulled up to the property. The house stood alone, like someone had dropped it from a different era into the middle of the Mojave Desert. A 1960s-style ranch with pale stucco walls, sun-bleached awnings, and decorative ironwork on the windows. It was weirdly intact, like the sandstorms had decided to leave it alone. Out of place. Out of time. "You sure this place is abandoned?" I asked. "Yeah, been for decades," Ron said, eyes scanning the distance. "Just do the kitchen and living room. Don't go poking around upstairs or in the basement. Ain't worth nothing down there." He handed me a crowbar and a flashlight, just one, since there was no power. "I'll be back at 5, maybe 6. With that, he drove off in a trail of dust. The van disappeared into the horizon, and the desert swallowed the sound. Inside, the house smelled like stale air and melted plastic. The furniture was still there, sun-cracked leather couches, shag carpets, dusty magazines from 1968, and a glass ashtray full of lipstick-stained butts. A rotary phone hung off the hook, its coiled cord stretched like it had been yanked during a fight. Everything looked like the owners had stepped out for groceries 50 years ago and never came back. I started in the kitchen, knocking out cabinet doors and prying up the chipped linoleum floor. By noon, I was sweating through my shirt, cursing the heat and guzzling what little water I had left. The silence out there was oppressive. No birds, no wind, just the buzzing of flies and the occasional creak of the house settling. But around 2 p.m., I started hearing things. At first, it was just the soft shuffle of footsteps upstairs. I froze, crowbar in hand, listening. Then silence. I convinced myself it was just the old place groaning in the sun. But then came the whispering, so faint I couldn't make out the words, but definitely voices. Human. Multiple. I shouted, "Ron!" out of instinct, knowing full well he was miles away. No answer. I crept toward the staircase and peered up. The landing above was cloaked in shadow, the banister half-rotted. "Hello?" I called. A soft tap-tap-tap echoed in response, like someone drumming their fingers on the floorboards. I bolted the front door open and stood outside in the scorching sun, trying to calm my nerves. No cell phone, no water left. Just sand, sky, and a house that felt increasingly wrong. But I couldn't leave. I had no ride. So I went back inside and tried to focus. More cabinets, more baseboards. Ignore the shadows. Then I found the photograph. It was wedged behind the refrigerator, yellowed and curling. A Polaroid of a young boy, maybe 10, standing in front of the house. Behind him stood a tall man with no face, not blurred, not shadowed, just missing. Smooth, like someone had taken an eraser to his features. I dropped it, heart pounding. When I picked it up again, the man was gone. Only the boy remained. That was when I knew something was watching me. As the sun dipped lower, the house grew colder, the shadows longer, the voices louder. Once I swear I heard my own name whispered from behind a closed bedroom door. Another time, I saw movement through a cracked bathroom mirror, something tall and thin passing behind me. By 7 p.m., I knew Ron wasn't coming. I tried to hike down the road, but within minutes I was disoriented. The house always seemed just behind me, no matter how far I walked. I screamed, threw rocks, cursed at the sky, but the sun kept sinking, and the house kept calling. When night fell, the temperature plummeted. I sat on the front steps, hugging my knees, flashlight flickering. The desert came alive with sounds I couldn't place. Whispers in the sand, thuds on the roof, skittering just out of sight. Then I heard it. A voice, not Ron's, not mine. "Don't leave." I spun around, light sweeping the porch. Nothing. "You're home now." The door creaked open by itself. The door creaked open, groaning on its rusted hinges like it hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the house was darker than it had any right to be. The desert moon lit the surrounding sand dunes like pale waves, but the interior of the house swallowed light. My flashlight flickered once and went dead. Perfect timing. I stepped backward, heart hammering. The voice I'd heard, "You're home now," still echoed in my mind. It wasn't just creepy. It was familiar, like someone I knew once but couldn't quite place. I waited on the porch, praying Ron's headlights would appear. They didn't. The desert was quiet now, but the oppressive kind of quiet, like the calm that follows a scream. The heat of the day was gone, replaced by cold air that bit at my skin. Eventually, I couldn't sit there any longer. I stepped back into the house. Navigating by moonlight, I moved carefully, feeling the floorboards bend and groan beneath me. I reached the hallway that led to the living room, then froze. The photograph I'd dropped earlier. It was back on the kitchen counter, propped upright, facing me. I approached it slowly. The boy was still there, but now he was older, maybe 16, like me. He wore the same clothes I was wearing. I picked it up with shaking hands and stared. The photo changed as I looked, his features aligning with mine, his expression one of subtle terror. I dropped it again. This time it didn't bounce. It landed with a flat slap, like it had weight beyond its size. That's when I heard it. A soft thumping, rhythmic, deliberate, coming from beneath my feet, from the basement. I remembered what Ron had said. Don't go poking around in the basement. Back then, I figured it was just junk storage. Now it felt like a warning. The basement door was at the end of a narrow hallway, hidden behind a wall-length curtain. I hadn't even noticed it earlier. When I pulled the curtain aside, the door stood there, pale green, covered in scratch marks, deep gouges along the frame, like someone had been trying to get out. No handle, just a keyhole. Old, rusted. The thumping grew louder, more frantic. Then it stopped. I should have walked away. I should have waited outside, cold or not. But I couldn't. Something compelled me to stay, to listen. I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. Then suddenly, 3 knocks from the other side, firm, measured, human. I jumped back. My spine hit the opposite wall, breath caught in my throat. I ran to the front door, locked. I hadn't locked it. I twisted the knob, slammed my shoulder against it. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I ran to the kitchen, tried the back door, sealed shut. The windows, nailed closed from the inside. Every exit, every possible escape was gone. I was trapped. Panic set in. I paced the hallway, mind racing, trying to make sense of it. This was a nightmare. It had to be. My flashlight still wouldn't turn on, but I remembered the house had old candles on the mantel. I found a pack of matches in a drawer and lit one. The second the flame flared, a face appeared in the mirror above the fireplace. Not mine. A gaunt, pale man. Hollow eyes, grinning. I dropped the match. The room went dark. When I lit another, the mirror was empty. Screw this. I ran back to the basement door, gripping the crowbar like a weapon. I didn't want to go down there, but the house clearly wanted me to. And some part of me, deep and buried, wanted to know why. I wedged the crowbar into the frame and pried. The wood groaned and split with a sharp crack. The door popped open, revealing a staircase that descended into pitch black. The smell hit me instantly. Mildew, rot, something metallic underneath. I lit another candle and stepped down. The staircase was longer than it should have been, at least 2 full stories down, and the walls were covered in wallpaper, old patterns of suns and moons, faded beyond recognition. As I descended, the air grew thicker, colder, harder to breathe. The light flickered like it was being sucked into the dark. At the bottom, the room opened up into a space far too large for the size of the house. It was cavernous, lined with shelves of jars, dozens, maybe hundreds, each one filled with murky liquid. Inside, teeth, bones, shrunken hands, cloudy eyeballs. preserved pieces of something once alive. In the center of the room was a chair, strapped to it a mannequin. Or at least I thought it was a mannequin, until it turned its head. Its eyes followed me, and then it spoke. "Why'd you come back?" I stumbled backward, tripping over something soft. Another mannequin. No, a body. A real one, mummified by time, mouth frozen in a silent scream. The thing in the chair groaned, its limbs twitching, trying to move. Its voice was wrong, like someone playing words backward through a broken cassette tape. My candle was burning too low. The shadows grew taller. I turned and ran. Up the stairs, back through the house, slamming into walls in the dark. I reached the living room and collapsed, chest heaving. The front door stood wide open, and Ron was standing there, pale, shaking. Jesus, kid, he muttered. I came back at 6. I circled for hours. The house wasn't here. I stared at him, wild-eyed. What do you mean? I mean, it was gone. Nothing but sand. I almost called the cops, but then it just appeared again. Like it never left. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. Ron grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the van. Forget the tools. Get in. We're not coming back here. I didn't argue. As we drove off, I looked back. The house was shrinking into the distance, its lights flickering behind broken windows. Just before it vanished from view, I saw the tall man again, standing in the doorway, smiling. We drove for miles without saying a word. Ron's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, eyes fixed ahead like he was afraid the house might reappear in the rear view. I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, jaw clenched, trying to process what had just happened. The house, the mannequin that moved, the basement that shouldn't have existed. The whisper I still heard in my head. Why'd you come back? Back? Ron finally broke the silence as we passed a gas station just outside 29 Palms. You tell anyone about this, they won't believe you. I'm not sure I believe me, I muttered. He nodded like that was good enough. He dropped me at my parents' place just before midnight and peeled off without another word. The engine screamed in the distance. I stood in the driveway for a long time, staring at the quiet outline of my house. The suburbs felt wrong now, too clean, too bright. I half expected the streetlights to blink out and that thing from the basement to come striding up the road behind me. I didn't sleep that night. For a while, I tried convincing myself it was a hallucination. Heat stroke, a bad reaction to dehydration. But the bruises on my shoulder from slamming into the hallway wall were real. The crowbar, still tucked into my tool bag, was bent at an odd angle, and in the front pocket of my jeans, I found the photograph again. The boy who looked just like me. His expression had changed. Now he was smiling. The next morning, I skipped work and rode my bike to Ron's shop. It wasn't a real shop, just a dusty lot behind a pawn store where he kept tools in a shipping container. His van was there, parked crookedly, back doors wide open. Ron? I called. No answer. I peeked inside the van, empty. A cigarette still burned in the ashtray. One of the side mirrors was hanging by a thread, as if something had grabbed it and twisted. I stepped inside the shipping container and froze. The walls were covered in maps, old yellowed ones, some hand-drawn, others ripped from books or road atlases. They were all pinned with red string and notes scrawled in Sharpie. Most of the strings led to one point in the Mojave, an area circled and marked House, 1963 to question mark. In the center of the wall was a Polaroid. The house, same turquoise door, same rusting gutters. In the corner of the photo, the same boy stood again, back turned. This time, there was a date written on the photo, June 17, 1978. A sticky note was attached beneath it. If you find this before I'm gone, don't go back. It doesn't want you to leave again. That's when I noticed the notebook on the desk. Ron's handwriting. I flipped through it, heart pounding. Ron's journal, excerpt third trip to the house. Same results. Left at 8 a.m., arrived at 8:47 a.m. Property appears only when approached from Route 19 westbound. Never appears on satellite. Attempted to map it. Maps burn when folded or stored too close to house. GPS glitches within 1 mile radius. Electrical watches stop. Time loops possible. Heard the boy again. Sounds like he's in the walls. Same question every time. Why'd you come back? Starting to think it's not addressed to me. Basement expands. More rooms now. Saw something with my face. Asked if I remembered the games. I didn't. Still don't. I slammed the journal shut, heart racing. Ron had been to the house before, multiple times, and he hadn't told me. But why bring me out there if he knew what it was? Did he think I wouldn't find the basement? That I wouldn't hear the voices? Or did he want me to? I scanned the maps again. One, at the far end of the wall, was burned badly, edges singed, center blackened. A note beneath it read, "Attempted destruction failed. House persists. Maybe tied to person, not place." My mouth went dry. Tied to person. I staggered out of the container into the harsh desert light, suddenly cold despite the heat. Was this thing following me now? As if in answer, my back pocket grew warm. I reached in. The photo. It had changed again. Now the boy was standing in front of my house. That night, the nightmares began. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe. In my dream, I was back in the house. Not how I remembered it, but new. Fresh paint. Dinner still warm on the table. A radio played some distant tune from another decade. I walked the halls, hearing voices upstairs, laughter, then screaming. The walls bled wallpaper. The basement door was open. I descended. At the bottom, the mannequin stood. But now it was me, strapped to the chair, mouth sewn shut, eyes pleading. Then it opened its mouth and said, "You never left." I woke drenched in sweat, the sound of violin music echoing in my ears. It wasn't in the dream, it was coming from outside. I leapt to my window and looked out. There, across the street, beneath a street lamp, was a tall, thin figure. He held something at his chin. A violin, bow moving slowly, deliberately, playing a waltz I didn't recognize. I blinked. He was gone. But the music played for 2 more minutes before fading. By morning, I made a decision. I had to go back. Not to the house, at least not yet, but to the burned map. There was something under that blackened spot. A location, maybe. Another route. Some clue. I returned to Ron's container. It was trashed. The maps were ripped down, the Polaroids burned, his notebook gone. Only the burned map remained, stuck to the metal wall by a single nail. I peeled it back carefully. Beneath the burn marks was a faint impression. Something had been written under it. I took a pencil, rubbed lightly. A name emerged, Marlowe's Rest, and beneath it, "Find the boy before the house does." I didn't even know if Marlowe's Rest was a town, a landmark, or a forgotten cemetery, but I couldn't ignore it. Not after what I'd seen, what I'd heard. The map was nearly charred to ash, but I managed to get a partial grid reference off the edge of the paper. It wasn't an address, it looked like coordinates. By the time the sun was up, I was halfway packed. Canteen, flashlight, extra batteries, a paper map, knife, crowbar, the bent photo, and Ron's burned map, which I sealed in a Ziploc bag. I wanted to find Ron, but his phone was disconnected, and the pawn shop owner said he hadn't seen him in days. No sign of him, no van, just dust where his footprints should have been. I borrowed my brother's truck, filled the tank, and headed back into the Mojave. About 3 hours southeast of where we'd originally found the house, the GPS lost signal. I followed the crumbling remnants of Route 66 until the road gave way to gravel and dust. Marlowe's Rest wasn't on any map, but the grid reference lined up with a patch of land west of a dried riverbed. Nothing but empty sand according to satellite. Only, it wasn't empty. As I crested the ridge, I saw it. A scattering of broken buildings and sun-bleached signs. A ghost town. The largest sign leaned against a collapsed post. The lettering had mostly peeled away, but under the glare I could just make out, Marlowe's Rest, established, 1910. Someone had spray-painted a warning across the bottom in red. Stay out, it's not empty. I drove the truck as far as I could until the tires sank in soft sand. From there, I walked. My boots crunched glass and gravel as I stepped over the skeletal remains of what had once been homes. The windows were shattered, doors hung like broken limbs. Wind howled through the alleyways, carrying the smell of scorched metal and dry rot. I passed a schoolhouse with desks still inside. On the chalkboard, faint words had been scrawled in white chalk. He comes for the ones who return. Then I found the well. It sat in the center of the ghost town, surrounded by black scorch marks. The stone rim was cracked, covered in claw-like gouges. Someone had carved something into the wood beam above the opening. Same face, different time. I stared down into the well. Darkness, then movement. Not wind, not an animal. Something shifted down there, like it was adjusting to look up. I stepped back. The air felt colder now, as if something under the surface was pulling the heat inward. That's when I saw the boy. He was standing in the doorway of a nearby shack. Same age, same hair, same clothes as the one from the photo. But this time, he wasn't looking away. He was staring right at me. I froze. He turned and walked into the shack. Without thinking, I followed. Inside, the walls were lined with old newspapers, yellow and curling. Dates ranged from 1959 to 1987. Some were stained with something dark, maybe blood. A cot lay in the corner, torn and mouldy, and in the center of the floor, another photograph. I picked it up. This time the photo showed me, standing in the shack. Right where I was standing now, and behind me, in the photo, something towered. A figure, faceless, tall, arms too long. It stood in the shadow of the doorway. I spun around, nothing there. But the door creaked open wider on its own, and something whispered low and close to my ear, even though the room was empty. "He's found you again." I ran. Straight out of the shack, across the square, back to the truck. The sun had lowered slightly, and the shadows were longer. As I reached the driver's side, I saw something scratched into the windshield. It hadn't been there before. "You never left." The engine coughed twice before turning over. I slammed it into gear and peeled away from Marlowe's Rest, the ghost town growing smaller in the rearview mirror until it vanished behind a ridge. But it didn't vanish completely. For a brief second, I saw the boy again, standing where the well had been, waving. That night, I barricaded myself in my apartment, every curtain drawn, every door locked. I tossed the photo onto my desk and tried to breathe, but the air in the apartment felt heavy, thick with the weight of the desert. The smell of sand still lingered on my clothes. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to a scratching noise, coming from inside my closet. I grabbed the crowbar and crept over, heart thundering in my chest. The scratching stopped as I touched the handle. I flung the door open. Nothing, except the photo of the boy. It had somehow moved from my desk to the top shelf of the closet. He was standing in front of a different house now. A 2-story structure, blue shutters, a faded red door. My childhood home. I slept with the lights on, crowbar clutched in my hand. In the morning, I decided I needed answers, real answers, not just from ghost towns and photographs. I had to know if this had happened to anyone else. Maybe Ron wasn't the first. Maybe he wasn't the only one who'd returned to the house and survived. So I went to the county records office, and I asked for every record they had about the house near Route 19, or Marlowe's Rest, or anything related to the coordinates I'd pulled off the burned map. The clerk looked puzzled, then pale. "You're not the first person to ask," she said. I blinked. "Who else?" She flipped through her notes and hesitated. "A man named Arthur Delaney. He came in last year asking the same thing, said he grew up out near Marlowe's Rest and remembered things that couldn't be real. What happened to him?" She swallowed. "He went missing a week later, car found near the house, doors open, engine running." She paused. Photograph on the dashboard. Just a boy. I couldn't get the name out of my head, Arthur Delaney. After leaving the records office, I drove straight to the public library, hoping they'd have anything on him. Missing persons notices, newspaper clippings, obituaries. Anything. They did. In a dusty archive drawer, tucked behind dozens of forgotten reels of microfilm, I found a newspaper from last year. The headline read, "Local author missing, last seen heading into the Mojave." Arthur Delaney, 46, historian, had written several books on ghost towns in the American Southwest. The article mentioned he'd been working on a new manuscript, one focused entirely on a town that didn't officially exist. He called it Marlowe's Rest. The article ended with a chilling quote from his wife. Arthur said he'd found something buried beneath that town, a name scratched into the walls of every building. He said it was following him. The librarian let me check out a copy of one of Arthur's older books, Dust and Echoes, Forgotten Settlements of the Mojave. I pored through it that night. Most of it was textbook dry, recounting old mining towns and bankrupt oil colonies. But toward the end, a short chapter stood out. The Hollow Town. It was only 6 pages long. Arthur claimed that during his research, he'd stumbled across conflicting maps. Some early 20th century surveys listed a place called Marlowe's Hollow, not Marlowe's Rest, same coordinates, but then it vanished from all official documentation after 1923. Not removed, erased. He wrote, "There are remnants, foundation stones, burnt well rings, and one building that never seems to age. Locals say the town is cursed, others claim it's a hoax, but I've been there, I've seen it. I've felt it watching me." The last paragraph chilled me. I dream about the boy now. Same face, same clothes, always standing beside a different house, always watching. That same boy I'd seen in the photo. The same one Ron had seen. The same one standing outside the well. Something else Arthur had written stuck with me. The house moves. It's never in the same place twice. It's always near, but just out of reach, until it wants to be found. I grabbed Ron's burned map and laid it beside Arthur's book. The grids matched up. Every place Ron had circled, abandoned homes, ghost towns, motels swallowed by sand, they all formed a pattern, like a spiral. At the center of it, the house, not a location, a destination, something you were led to. I couldn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the scratching. Sometimes it came from the walls, sometimes under the floorboards. Once it came from inside the bathroom mirror. At 3:11 a.m., I snapped awake to a crash in the kitchen. I grabbed the crowbar and crept down the hallway. Nothing looked broken. Nothing seemed touched. Except, on the kitchen table lay another photograph. Fresh, crisp, not burned or faded. In it, I stood in the hallway, crowbar in hand. And behind me, just barely visible in the shadowed frame of the bedroom door, was a figure. Tall, thin, head tilted at an impossible angle. I turned around. Nothing. But the hallway was colder now. The next day, I called every historical society, local expert, and weird forum contact I could think of. Only one person called back. A woman named Lena Farrell, paranormal investigator, said she'd worked with Arthur Delaney years ago and had been trying to locate Marlowe's Rest ever since he vanished. She agreed to meet me at a diner just outside the desert edge. Lena was in her late 40s, dark ponytail, serious eyes. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You went to the house, didn't you?" I nodded. "Twice." She exhaled through her nose. "Then you need to listen. Closely." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of old journal entries, sketches and photographs, some eerily similar to mine. All from people who'd encountered the house. Some were from the 1960s. One dated back to 1927. All mentioned the same details. A boy who never ages. A well in the center of town. A photograph that changes. A name whispered in the walls. Marlowe. Lena tapped one entry, written by a man named Walter Kinsey in 1962. He called it the Bleeding House, said it showed up after he buried his brother near the canyons. Claimed it moves like an animal in the dark, that it chooses its visitors. Another page showed a crude drawing of the house, complete with the red door and blue shutters. I nearly choked. "That's my childhood house," I whispered. Lena nodded grimly. "It shows you what you're tied to, what you regret. It feeds on that." She said no one who truly sees the house ever walks away unchanged. Not unless they leave something behind. Something valuable, something painful. I asked her what she meant. Your memory, your guilt, sometimes even people. She handed me one last photo. This one was old, frayed around the edges. It showed the boy. Only now he was smiling. Barely, and in his hand he held something. A Polaroid camera. On the back, written in faded pen, "Marlowe is always watching. He only needs your face." That night I dreamed of fire. The house was burning, and inside it every photograph I'd ever taken screamed. Not the people. The photos. Their mouths opened wide, curling and burning into ash, their eyes bleeding ink. When I woke, the walls of my apartment were covered in black and white photos. They hadn't been there the night before. They were all of me. Sleeping. In one of them, the boy stood in the corner of the room. It started with the smell, not rot, not mildew. Something sweeter, but unnatural, like overripe fruit soaked in ammonia. The kind of scent that curls at the edge of your brain and makes your spine itch. It was in my apartment when I woke up. Clinging to the air, I checked every corner for where it could be coming from. And then I found it. A single photograph on the kitchen counter. Not one of me this time. It was a close-up shot of the well. The boy wasn't in this one, but something else was. Down at the bottom of the well, just barely visible in the photo, was a pale hand reaching up through the darkness. Scrawled on the back in shaky handwriting, "You left it open." That same morning, Lena called me in a panic. "Don't go back," she said before I could even say hello. "It doesn't want visitors anymore." I asked her what she meant, but she was out of breath, her voice thick with fear. I found something else. In Arthur's notes, he was trying to figure out the rules. That house, it plays fair in its own way. But if you break the rules, it takes something from you. She faxed me a page from one of Arthur's journals, written in a hurried scrawl, nearly illegible. The rules of the house: do not speak to the boy. Do not look into the well after sundown. Close every door you open. Do not bring photographs into the house. Do not sleep there. If you hear someone calling your name from outside, ignore it. Never take anything from the house with you. Do not stay past 3:33 a.m. At the bottom, Arthur had underlined one line 3 times. You can leave, but only if it lets you. I was already shaking as I read the list. I had broken 5 of those rules. I'd looked in the well after sundown. I'd spoken to the boy. I'd stayed there overnight. I'd brought photographs with me, and worst of all, I'd taken something with me. The photo of the boy and the Polaroid camera. And now it was here, in my apartment. I stared at the picture again, the pale hand in the well. Had it always been there? Had it reached further up since the last time I looked? It was hard to tell. But something inside me whispered, yes. I tried burning it. The photo, the stack of others, every single one I could find. They didn't burn. The flames licked the edges, blackening the corners, but the images remained, frozen, fixed. The boy's face locked in that dead stare. The hand pale and hungry. The smell of overripe rot grew stronger. That night my apartment changed. The layout was off. The hallway was longer. My bedroom door creaked when I opened it, revealing not my bed but the red-walled hallway from the desert house. I stepped back in terror, slammed the door shut, reopened it. My room was back. But for a moment I'd seen it, just like Arthur described. The house moves. It shifts. It follows you. It had followed me. Lena didn't answer my calls the next day. I drove to her motel. The door was ajar. The lights were flickering. No one inside, only a Polaroid camera on the bed. Next to it was a single photograph. The well again. This time, the hand was halfway out, and beside it, a face just beneath the surface. Lena's face. Her eyes were open. She was screaming. I drove straight back to the desert. No map this time, no GPS. I didn't need them. The house wanted me back. The roads curved in ways they hadn't before. Sand kicked up behind me, but my tires made no sound. The sky darkened too fast, turning orange to deep violet in under a minute. The world felt like it was folding in around me. And then it was there. The house, exactly as I remembered it. Red door, blue shutters, porch swing that creaked even when the air was still. It hadn't aged, it hadn't changed. But something was wrong. The front door was wide open. Inside, it was colder than it had any right to be. No wind, no air circulation, just still, stifling cold. I called out, "Lena?" No answer, just a slow knock from upstairs. 3 knocks. Pause, 3 more. I gripped the crowbar and climbed the stairs. Each step groaned like it hadn't been walked in decades. Dust clung to the walls. The photos that once hung on them were gone. I reached the top landing. A new door had appeared, smaller than the rest, child-sized and painted black. It creaked open before I could touch it. Inside was a small room with no windows. Just a chair, a table, and a mirror. Sitting on the table was a notebook, one of Arthur's. I picked it up with trembling hands and flipped to the first page. If you're reading this, you've already broken the rules. There's no saving you now. But maybe you can trap it again. It's not a ghost, not a demon. It's a memory. A wrong one. A scar in time. You can't kill it, but you can trade with it. On the next page, it wants you to remember. The more you do, the closer it gets. But if you give it a new memory, something real, it might let you go. Just once. I didn't understand. Not yet. But the mirror on the wall showed something that made my heart stop, my reflection. And behind me, the boy. Standing just outside the door. I spun around. The hallway behind me was empty. No boy, no shadow, no sound. But the cold lingered, an almost wet kind of cold, like the air had passed through something dead before touching my skin. I stepped back from the mirror, heart thudding so hard it echoed in my ears. The notebook was heavier than it should have been. I opened it again. A new page had been added. I was sure of it. The ink was still wet. You're not the first, but maybe you'll be the last. And then, beneath that line, coordinates. They weren't for the house. They were deeper into the desert, into nowhere. I left the room. The boy's presence clung to the air like something had passed through recently but wasn't gone. Downstairs, the house felt even more decayed. The wallpaper had curled off the walls. Mold ran along the seams. The smell of ammonia-sweet rot filled every breath. And in the center of the living room floor, scratched into the wood, was a circle. Inside it, symbols I didn't recognize. Jagged lines, spirals, and one unmistakable shape, an eye. The same eye I'd seen on the back of an old photo. As I stared at the circle, something behind me whispered, "It remembers you." I turned, ready to swing the crowbar. But again no one, only the boy's photograph on the floor, face down. I picked it up. He was smiling now. Blood dripped from his mouth. I got in my car and drove to the coordinates in the notebook. There was no road, just a suggestion of one. A path where the sand looked disturbed, like it had been driven over countless times but never remembered. I followed it until the car wouldn't go further. I walked the last stretch. The wind whispered strange things through the brush. My name. My mother's voice. The sound of the swing set from my childhood backyard. Sounds that didn't belong here. Then I saw it. Not a house, not a shack. A stone archway, rising from the desert like a forgotten monument. Covered in carvings, covered in names. Some were scratched, some were burned in. Some were written in chalk that hadn't faded, as if fresh. My name wasn't there. Yet. Beneath the arch was a wooden crate. Inside, dozens of items, personal things, a baby's rattle, a wedding ring, a single ballet shoe, a strip of photo negatives, and on top of it all, Arthur Delaney's voice recorder. I pressed play. "This is Arthur. If you're hearing this, then the house let you go. Or you're trapped like I was. Either way, you know it's real now." His voice trembled. "It took my wife first. I left a photo of her on the kitchen counter, and when I came back, she was gone. Not missing, forgotten. Our apartment was empty. Her things were gone. Everyone I asked said I'd always lived alone." He paused. "The house doesn't kill, not in the traditional sense. It rewrites, it replaces, it erases. That boy, Marlowe, he was the first. A kid whose town was buried in a flood that never happened. A memory that shouldn't exist. But it does. Because of the house. Or maybe it is the house. Then, it feeds on significance, on the things we can't let go, but you can bargain with it, leave something behind, something you care about, something important, and it'll give you back your life." Click. The recording ended. I stared at the crate full of lost things, each one a sacrifice, each one a trade. Arthur had given up someone he loved. What was I willing to give? That night, I slept in my car, or tried to. But the house found me again. I dreamed of the red hallway, the well, The boy sitting on the edge, swinging his legs. He turned to look at me, his eyes bottomless pits, and said, "You took too much." When I woke, my phone was gone. So was my wallet, even my name tag from work, ripped clean off my shirt, erased. Piece by piece, the house was taking me apart. Back at the house, I entered with trembling hands and a decision made. I would make a trade. I brought only one thing: a photo of my younger sister. She died when I was 10, hit by a car while riding the bike I had begged her to borrow. I'd spent my whole life carrying the weight of that day, never forgiving myself. The photo was the only thing I had left of her. It was taken the morning before she died. She was smiling. I placed it in the center of the carved circle in the floor. The house groaned. The temperature dropped so suddenly, my breath fogged the air. And then the boy appeared, standing in the doorway. He didn't speak, he just pointed. To the photo, then to me, then to the door. I didn't ask questions. I left. I walked backward, never turning away from him. When I stepped off the porch, I felt something pass through me, a cold electric snap, like walking through static. The house behind me blinked. One moment it was there. The next, it was gone. When I got back to town, the photo was no longer in my pocket, but something else was. A Polaroid. Of me, standing in the desert, the boy behind me out of focus, mid-smile. On the back, written in the same hand I'd seen before, "You gave her back, so I'll give you time." I tried to convince myself that it was over. The house was gone. The boy, Marlowe, had taken the photograph, accepted the trade, and let me leave. I hadn't heard from Lena. The photos stopped appearing. The scent of ammonia finally faded from my apartment. A part of me believed I'd buried it all, but like the desert itself, the house never really lets anything stay buried. Not forever. 2 weeks passed. I resumed my life. What was left of it? Friends acted like I'd only been out of town for a few days. My boss never questioned my absence. The people who should have been worried about me simply weren't. It was as if the house hadn't just erased parts of my memory. It had rewritten everyone else's too. And yet, I still had the Polaroid. Me in the desert, Marlowe behind me. Every time I looked at it, I felt the boy's eyes crawling across my skin. He was always out of focus. But somehow I could still feel his smile. I tried to destroy it, burned it in the sink. Watched the edges curl and blacken, but when I came back an hour later, it was there again, taped to my mirror, like a warning, or a countdown. One morning, I found a man waiting outside my apartment. Lean, late 50s, dressed in desert gear and sunglasses too dark for the overcast morning. He introduced himself with a raspy voice and a firm grip. "Name's Hector. I was a friend of Arthur Delaney." The air dropped 10 degrees around me. He didn't wait to be invited in. "I know what you did," he said once we sat, "and I know what it wants now." I asked him what he meant. He pulled out a folder, old and sun-damaged. Inside were photos, articles, handwritten notes, and a few sketches that made my stomach turn. "I've been chasing that house for 30 years, Hector said. "It moves, always has. It appears where something was supposed to happen, but didn't. Natural disasters that never occurred, murders that were planned but never carried out. It feeds on what could have been." Possibility, he slid a photo across the table. It was the boy. Only not. "Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe." The same face, same wide eyes, but this time dressed in modern clothes. Hoodie, sneakers. Standing in front of what looked like a strip mall in Nevada. "Taken 3 days ago," Hector said. "He's walking again." He showed me more, reports of people going missing, photographs turning up in strangers' homes. A girl in Texas who started speaking languages she'd never learned. A man in Oregon who woke up to find his own obituary clipped to his fridge. All of them had seen the house. Most didn't live long after. Some lived, but forgot who they were. And a few, Hector explained, were given the same option I had, a trade. "I traded my brother," he said softly, "back in 1991. We were twins. He died in a car crash. I gave the house a photo of the wreck. Next morning my brother was alive, and I was the one who died. On paper, anyway." I asked him if he regretted it. He didn't answer, just said, "You don't stop owing it. You just buy time." I started dreaming again, of the well, of the circle carved in the floorboards, but now something new. I was standing in the mirror room again, facing my reflection. Only it wasn't me in the glass. It was Marlowe. He mimicked my movements perfectly, smiled when I smiled, then he raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned in the dream. A door stood open at the end of the hallway. Inside, a figure slouched at a writing desk. Pale hands, blackened fingernails. It turned slightly, just enough for me to see. It wore my face, older, more tired, eyes hollowed out, leaking shadows. It whispered, "The trade wasn't enough. You owe more." I woke up gasping, heart hammering like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. There were photos scattered across my apartment again, dozens, all new, none of them taken by me. One showed a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket, my niece, just 2 months old. Another showed my father sitting in his favorite chair, asleep. Another, my boss, standing in the parking lot behind our office, talking to a man with no face. Then I found one of myself. But it wasn't recent. It was me at 6 years old, playing with my sister, the one I'd traded. The next day, Hector called me in a panic. "It's coming back," he said. "The house. It's been spotted again. Same style, same porch swing. This time, New Mexico. It wants more than you gave it." I asked him why it needed more. "Because you remembered her," he said. "The girl you traded. You've thought about her every day since. That's not how it works. You don't get to mourn what you gave. You remember it too much. It comes looking." He told me to meet him, said he had a plan, a way to end it. For good this time? I packed quickly, left the apartment by nightfall. As I locked the door, I saw something slip under it. A photo. Fresh, still warm from the camera. It was Hector, lying face down in the dirt. His back was torn open like he'd been split with a blade. On the back of the photo, in the same handwriting as always, "He remembered too much. I drove all night. Past state lines, past cell reception, past anything familiar." The road narrowed, then disappeared entirely, replaced by hard-packed desert. My GPS glitched out. I stopped when the sun started bleeding over the hills and the sky went red-orange like a skinned fruit. The house was already there, waiting, exactly the same chipped siding, same stoop with the broken swing, same cracked window still covered in grime. Only now. It pulsed. The boards on the porch seemed to breathe, rising and falling like a chest. The entire structure swayed slightly, like it was caught in an unseen tide. There was no wind, no birds, not even the usual hum of desert insects. Just the house, alive and hungry. I stood still for a long time, fighting every instinct not to turn around. But Hector's photo was still in my pocket, his eyes blank, his blood soaking the sand. A reminder the house didn't stop once it started feeding, it just paused between courses. It was my fault. I'd thought about my sister, said her name aloud, looked at old photos. That's all it took. Memory was a tether, and the house followed it back. I stepped up onto the porch. The swing creaked once, not from the wind, but like someone had just stood up from it. The door opened on its own. Darkness inside, not normal dark, a thick velvety black that swallowed the light from outside. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me, and what I could see shimmered like water. I stepped inside, the door shut behind me. At first I was alone, no footsteps, no whispers, just me and the thick, warm dark. Then I saw the photos. They were pinned to the walls with rusty nails, hundreds of them. Some I recognized, my sister, my childhood home, my old school. But others weren't mine. They showed strangers, some smiling, some screaming, some caught mid-run. One showed a girl, maybe 15, standing in front of the very same house. Her face was blurred like a corrupted file, but behind her, standing in the open doorway, was Marlowe, smiling, holding a match. The hallway reappeared. Same red walls, same doors on either side, same mirror at the end. I walked toward it slowly. My own reflection looked back at me, only slightly delayed, like a lagging video call. Then it blinked. But I didn't. I took another step. My reflection stayed still. Then it smiled. Marlowe's smile. I turned around fast and found myself staring into a room that hadn't been there a moment before. The hollow room. That's the only way to describe it. No windows, no lights, just a void painted in fading shades of tan and beige. The carpet was wet and soft under my feet, like something had soaked it recently. In the center of the room sat a desk. Old, dented metal. A single notebook rested on it. Next to it, a mirror. Standing full length, its glass rippled like disturbed water. And beside that, a chair, facing the mirror, empty, waiting. I approached the desk first. The notebook had only one page filled, written in tight, elegant cursive, "To keep what you have, give what you are." Beneath it, two boxes, one labeled memory, the other name. I looked over at the mirror. It shimmered again. This time I saw two figures in it. Me and Marlowe, side by side, same face, same height, but his eyes were pure black now, like someone had scooped out everything behind them and filled it with ink. He spoke without moving his lips. "You're still holding on." I asked him what he wanted. Everything. He raised a hand and pointed at the boxes. Then at the chair. "Sit, choose, or we choose for you." I backed away, shaking, dizzy. The room began to tilt. Or maybe it was me. I pressed my palms to the wall, trying to steady myself. When I turned back, something had changed. A third figure had appeared in the mirror. My sister. She looked how I remembered her, but older, as if she'd aged in some hidden dimension separate from time. Her eyes locked onto mine. She mouthed something. "Don't." The house groaned. The carpet began to bubble, blisters of mold and heat pulsing under the surface. Marlowe stepped out of the mirror. His smile was gone. Now only hunger. He reached for me. His hands felt like static and ice. I backed away and fell into the chair. The boxes were in front of me now. Memory, name. The mirror showed all three of us. Me, the boy, my sister. Time felt wrong, like the moment was being stretched in all directions. My thoughts felt distant, detached. Then I heard a voice behind me, familiar, gravelly. "Hector." "Don't give it your name," he rasped. "That's the last piece. Without it, it can't finish." I turned. He stood in the doorway, chest torn open, eyes glassy, but standing, or pretending to. "You need to take it with you," he said. "Burn it, the real it." He held something out, a photo. The house, but not how I remembered it. This version was older, smaller. Wooden siding almost completely rotted. Windows smashed in. The photo had a date scrawled on the back. 1913. Then Hector collapsed, turned to dust. Literally, his body crumbling like sand blown apart by the wind. And Marlowe screamed. Not out loud, but inside me. The sound made my bones vibrate. The room cracked, the walls split open, and I ran. I didn't look back as I pushed through the hallway, through the flickering door, past the porch swing, now moving violently on its own, and down into the sand. The house howled behind me, then collapsed. Not in fire, not in rubble, but like a balloon deflating into a single point. A speck. Then nothing. I was alone. The photo of the 1913 house was still in my hand. I didn't know what it meant yet. But I knew where I had to go next. Back in time. To the origin. I drove all night again. I didn't know where I was going, not exactly, but the photo of the house in 1913 was burned into my mind. The walls of the house were already rotting away in the photograph, the windows shattered, the door ajar. I knew I had to find that house, or at least the place it had once been. The desert had changed little since I last saw it. It stretched out in every direction, an endless sea of dirt and heat, barely a shadow in sight. The map in my hands seemed useless. There were no signs, no landmarks, just empty miles of sand and scrub. The photo's edges curled with age as I stared at it, still not understanding why I was seeing this particular image. But it wasn't just the house. There was something in the background of the picture. Something so faint, so distant, that I hadn't noticed it at first. A figure, a man. He was standing by a well, just outside the house, but not close enough to be easily noticed, not unless you knew to look. His shadow stretched long against the cracked earth, and his posture was unnerving, like he was waiting for someone. Or something. I found the well first. It was nothing more than a stone circle, sunken into the ground like a forgotten relic. The earth around it was dry and brittle, the lip cracked, and it had to be the same well from the photograph, the same spot where the man had stood, only he was long gone. I knelt beside the well, brushing my fingers over the jagged stones. There was something wrong about it, something deep in my gut that twisted every time I tried to get too close. I didn't belong here. I didn't belong anywhere connected to this place, but I had no choice. Hector had told me to burn it. The real it. The problem was, I didn't know what it was. As I stood up, I heard something. A whisper. A faint rustling of dry leaves, like the wind had suddenly stirred after days of stillness. But the air around me remained hot, thick with desert dust. The whisper came again. I turned sharply. A figure stepped from the shadows of the dead house. At first I thought it was Marlowe, the boy from the photos. His body stretched impossibly thin, his face just as featureless as before, save for those black, empty eyes. He grinned the way he always did, wide and knowing, but this time there was something else. A presence, a weight in the air, in the sand beneath my feet. A suffocating pulse that made the ground seem to throb beneath me, as though it too was alive. Looking for something? Marlowe's voice was a distorted echo, 1,000 voices speaking through him, layered on top of one another, each one more sinister than the last. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice hoarse, my throat raw from the dust. He stepped closer, his shoes scraping against the ground with a wet sound that made my skin crawl. As he drew nearer, the air grew colder and the shadows deepened. He stopped right in front of me, his smile widening. "I am everything," he whispered, his voice dripping like oil. "I am what was forgotten." The words made no sense. I opened my mouth to ask again, but he continued before I could speak. "It began long before 1913, Marlowe said, his grin faltering for a moment, his eyes flashing with something darker. "The house. It wasn't a house. Not at first." I felt my heart thud in my chest, a cold knot forming in my stomach. His words were heavy with the weight of something ancient, something dangerous. "The house wasn't just a place, it was a vessel," Marlowe continued, "a place where life could be drained, where the history of everything it touched was trapped forever. It was never meant to be found. It was never meant to be remembered. But you," he paused, his grin twisting, "you remembered." I backed away, the image of my sister flashing in my mind, her warning. The house had taken her, and I'd given her to it. But the house wasn't just some place, it was something alive. Something that fed on what could have been, on the echoes of lost lives and broken promises. Marlowe was no longer just a boy. He was the house. He was the embodiment of everything that had been trapped within it, of every soul that had been consumed, and I had helped it grow. I had fed it. The ground beneath my feet began to rumble. The well trembled, the stones vibrating with a low, guttural hum. The desert wind kicked up dust, swarming in the air around us. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, of things long forgotten. And then I saw it. A shape rising from the earth. At first I thought it was the house again, reforming from the dirt and sand, but it wasn't the house. Not quite. It was something worse. A figure, hunched and grotesque, formed from the bones of the earth itself, wrapped in tattered remnants of cloth, its face covered in shadow. It moved like it was made of sludge, each step a slow, calculated shift through the dirt. The figure reached up to the sky with one hand, its fingers long and thin, like branches of a dead tree. Its mouth opened, revealing nothing but an endless abyss of blackness inside. I heard it then. The sound of 1,000 whispers, 1,000 voices calling from the dark. And the voice that came through the shadowed figure was one I knew too well. "You've come," it said, but it wasn't Marlowe's voice anymore. It was deeper, older, like the earth itself was speaking. "Now you will make your final choice." I froze. What had I done? The figure in front of me continued to sway, its limbs twisting unnaturally like a puppet on frayed strings. The ground beneath me cracked with the deep sound of bones scraping together. The air was thick with a suffocating weight, and I couldn't breathe. couldn't think, could barely move. The blackness in the figure's mouth seemed to pulse, as if it was trying to draw me in. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The desert stretched out behind me, the horizon a distant blur of light and shadow, but there was no escape from this thing. The house had found me again, and this time it had no intention of letting go. "You've already given so much," the voice rumbled from the figure's mouth, the sound vibrating deep in my chest. "Your memories, your name, your sister." It took a step forward, the earth groaning with each movement. The sand around it seemed to twist and writhe, drawn into the figure's presence like it was being consumed by some unseen force. I shook my head, trying to force the words out of my mouth. I didn't mean for this." "It's too late for regrets," the figure interrupted, its tone dripping with ancient, unfeeling malice. "You're part of it now, all of you. You are the house. You are the vessel." The air seemed to shift again, the temperature plunging into an unbearable cold. I could see my breath misting in front of me, each exhale visible like the fog of death. The wind picked up, howling as it whipped through the desert, tearing at the air and sending sand flying in every direction. And then I saw it. The house. It rose from the ground like a creature of nightmare, the familiar outline taking shape in front of me, only it was wrong. Twisted. The walls were made of flesh now, pulsing, bleeding. The door hung open like a cavernous mouth, eager to swallow everything in its path. It was alive. And it was hungry. "Do you understand now?" the figure asked, its voice a low growl, an echo of every breath I had ever taken. "You are what feeds it, and it feeds off you, forever." The figure's arms extended, reaching toward me, the air thick with the sensation of pressure, as if I was being pulled toward it. The blackness within its mouth seemed to grow wider, swallowing the light around me. I fought against the pull, struggling to breathe, to think, to act. But every instinct told me to run. Yet I was trapped in the desert, surrounded by the endless, gnawing hunger of the house and the creature that had emerged from it. "Choose," the figure commanded. "Do you embrace it? Do you accept your place within it? Or do you let it consume you?" I stood there, trembling, the weight of the choice pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. It was not just a choice between life and death, it was a choice of identity, of purpose, of existence itself. The house had already taken so much from me, and I had already given so much of myself, but there was still something left, something I could hold on to. The memories of my sister, of Hector, of everything that had brought me here, they were all a part of me, and I was not going to give up on them. "I won't be your vessel," I whispered, my voice hoarse and cracking with the effort. "I won't let you take me." The figure paused. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The sand around us stilled. The air became thick with a silence so deep that it hurt. Then the ground beneath me shook, a violent tremor that sent me stumbling back. The figure roared in frustration, its limbs writhing as the house behind it seemed to breathe faster, faster, its walls swelling and contracting in a rhythmic, monstrous pulse. "No," the figure hissed. "You are already a part of it. There is no escaping what has been done." But something was changing. The air around me seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. The well behind me, the one I had found earlier, began to glow faintly, its stones lighting up with a soft blue fire. The sand beneath my feet started to shift, moving in patterns I couldn't quite understand. Lines of light tracing ancient symbols that seemed to dance across the desert floor. The house, too, began to tremble. Its walls cracked open wider, revealing something dark and alive within. It was as if the house itself was fighting to remain intact, as if it was trying to tear itself apart. And then I saw it. A shadow, no, something, moved inside the house. It was small at first, just a flicker of movement in the corner of my vision, but it grew larger, bigger, the shape of something that didn't belong, something that was never meant to be part of the house. I stepped forward, the photo of the 1913 house still clutched in my hand. The figure in the distance had long disappeared, and in its place was the faint outline of a woman standing in the doorway of the house, her figure distorted by the blackness that surrounded her. It was my sister, but she was different. Her eyes were black, empty. I ran. I couldn't stop myself. My legs moved before my mind could comprehend the action, and I found myself charging toward the house, the desert whirling around me. The image of my sister's face, her empty eyes, pushed me forward. I burst through the door of the house. The darkness inside was suffocating, the air thick with the smell of decay. I could feel the walls closing in around me, the floor beneath me slick with something wet and foreign. And then I saw her. Not the woman from the doorway, but the thing that had once been her. The real thing. Her body was slumped against the wall, a lifeless heap, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her skin was pale, stretched tight across bones. And in her hand, clutched so tightly it was almost impossible to see, was the final clue I had been searching for. The journal. I knew what I had to do. The journal felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of the years, the stories and the souls it had absorbed had condensed into its very pages. I stood there in the dark, the house creaking and groaning around me like it was alive. The air was thick with dust, with the smell of something far worse than decay, something ancient, something that had always been here, buried beneath the desert sands. The journal was old, its leather cover cracked and brittle, the pages yellowed with time. I knew, without even opening it, that it contained the final piece of the puzzle, the answer to why the house had called me, why I had been drawn here in the first place, why I couldn't escape, even though I had tried. And more terrifying still, the reason why I was meant to be here. I reached out and grabbed the journal from my sister's cold hand, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the pages. As soon as I touched it, a jolt of electricity shot through me, as if the house itself had recognized my touch. I could feel it in my bones. The presence. The thing that had always been here, in the dark corners of the house, in the depths of the well, in the earth beneath my feet. It was not the house that was alive. It was the land itself. I opened the journal. The first page was blank, but as I turned the next few, words began to form on their own, slowly, deliberately, as though they were being written by an unseen hand. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't look away. I had to know. The words were simple at first. The house was never meant to be built. It was a prison. I flipped through the pages frantically, the words swirling and shifting before my eyes. The journal seemed to come alive in my hands, each page revealing a new chapter of a nightmare that had started long before the house had ever existed. The land is cursed. The house was built to contain what should not be contained, to feed on the souls of those who come too close. The pages detailed the original builders of the house, a group of settlers who had arrived in the desert decades before, unaware of what lay beneath their feet. The house had been constructed atop a forgotten burial ground, the bones of an ancient civilization that had worshipped something dark, a being that had lived in the desert for centuries, feeding off the land, feeding off the lives of those foolish enough to settle there. The settlers had been drawn to the land by a strange compulsion, a whisper in the wind, a call from the deep earth itself. They had built the house, not knowing that it was meant to trap them, to keep them there. The walls had been constructed from the bones of the dead, the very foundation of the house made from the remains of those who had gone before. The house was alive, feeding on them, and it had only grown stronger with time. I felt the floor beneath me shift, and I knew without looking that the walls were closing in. The air around me thickened, the house pulsing with a rhythmic, unholy beat. The very walls seemed to breathe, inhaling and exhaling as if the house itself had become a living, hungry thing. And then I realized it. The house had always been the thing. The journal, the land, the figure that had appeared before me. It was all part of the same dark energy, the same force that had been growing beneath the desert for centuries. The house had been the vessel, the prison, but it had also been the means of escape. If I could destroy the house, destroy the land, I could break the cycle. I could free my sister's soul and my own. But how? The journal's final pages held the answer. To destroy the house, you must destroy the well. The well, the source of everything. It was never just a well. It was the anchor that had tied the house to this world, the connection between the living and the dead. It had been used to bind the souls, to feed the land, to keep the house alive. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The house was already fading, its form beginning to warp, to crumble in on itself. The walls of flesh that had once stretched high above the desert now buckled and collapsed, and the dark figure of my sister's twisted form was no longer in the house. The presence, the pulse of the land began to wane, but the well was still there, still waiting. The sun was setting behind me as I made my way back to the well, the sand shifting beneath my feet as if the earth was trying to pull me under. The figure was gone. The house was gone. But there was still the well, and I could feel it pulling at me, the weight of everything that had been trapped inside it, the souls, the horrors. I knelt beside the well, my hands shaking as I reached down, grabbing the stones and pulling them apart. The well was deep, but I could feel the pulse of it, the throbbing, the desperate call for release, and then I saw it, a single black stone at the bottom. It was not a stone, it was something else, a heart. A beating, pulsing heart embedded in the very foundation of the well. I pulled it out. The world around me seemed to explode. The air rippled with energy, the ground beneath my feet cracking open. The sky turned black, as though the sun had been swallowed whole. The house was gone. The land was falling away, the desert consumed by an unrelenting darkness that spread faster than I could run. The house had been more than a prison. It had been a door, a gateway to something far darker, and now it was open. I knew I had broken the curse, but in doing so I had opened a door that could never be closed again. The last thing I remember was the wind, a soft whisper in the air, the sound of my sister's voice calling my name. And then nothing. Before we move on, please donate me in the form of subscribe.